Think about the last time you actually touched money. Not spent money, touched it. This morning, you bought a coffee by tapping a rectangle of glass against a different rectangle of glass. And somewhere, in a building you will never see, one number got smaller and another number got bigger. And everyone agreed to call that a transaction. You get paid in numbers. You pay rent in numbers. You have apps that move the numbers, apps that watch the numbers, and one app that sends you a notification when the numbers are low, as if you didn't know, as if you weren't lying awake thinking about the numbers. Now, remove all of that. Remove the phone, remove the cards, remove the bank account, remove the credit score you've been apologizing to since 2019. Remove the wallet entirely. Cash itself is now illegal. Holding a $5 bill is a punishable offense. And here is your new situation. You have a job, and the job pays 23 cents an hour. A tube of toothpaste costs $4. Do that math. 17 hours of labor, 2 full days of work for toothpaste. A 15-minute phone call to your mother costs more than your entire day. And here's the part that should genuinely stop you. Inside that exact system right now, there are men who are wealthy, men with employees, men with loan portfolios and perfect repayment rates, men running investment operations denominated in fish. Not slang for something. Fish. How? That is not a rhetorical question, and the answer is one of the most remarkable stories in the history of money. This is the question nobody thinks to ask about prison, because we're usually too busy asking about the dramatic stuff. The riots, the escapes, the gangs, the things documentaries put in the thumbnail. But money is unglamorous and relentless, and inside a prison it governs more daily life than violence ever has. Whether you eat enough, whether you can call home, whether you have shoes that fit, aspirin when your head hurts, coffee when the day will not end. The official position of nearly every prison on earth is that money, in inmate hands, does not exist. Cash is contraband, and yet every prison on earth has a functioning economy. Currencies, wages, prices, credit, interest rates, entrepreneurs, and yes, occasionally, bank failures. Because here is the thing most people have never been told. Prisoners did not smuggle an economy into prison. They rebuilt one, from nothing, the way humans always do. And watching them do it taught economists more about what money actually is than almost any experiment ever run on the outside. So, how do prisoners get money? The answer takes us through an 18th century London jail that ran on tips like a nightclub, a World War II prison camp where a captured economist watched money invent itself in about a month. A federal smoking ban that demonetized an entire currency overnight and replaced it with mackerel, and a 59-cent brick of noodles that has held its value better than the dollar. Let's go through exactly how it works. First, you have to understand the actual problem, because the mechanism is the whole story. Prison abolished cash. It did not abolish need. The state provides a baseline, 3 meals, a bunk, a bar of soap, and the baseline is engineered to be exactly that, a line at the bottom. The meals run out of calories before a grown man runs out of hunger. The soap is the soap. Everything above the line, deodorant, decent shoes, instant coffee, a jar of peanut butter, shower sandals so your feet don't touch that floor, costs money. And the money has to come from somewhere, so the state offers you a job. In the federal system, most prison jobs pay between 12 and 40 cents an hour. Several states, Texas, Georgia, Alabama among them, pay nothing at all, 0. And you thought your raise didn't keep up with inflation. Hold on to that number, 23 cents, right in the middle of the range because it is the touchstone for everything that follows. At 23 cents an hour, a $4 tube of toothpaste is 17 hours of labor. A month of phone calls can outrun a month of wages. And the only legal store, the commissary, is a monopoly with a captive customer base, which is a phrase that would make certain tech executives need a moment alone. One store. No competition, no coupons, prices set by a contractor whose customers cannot go anywhere else, in the most literal sense that sentence has ever been used. The gap between 23 cents an hour and $4 toothpaste is not a flaw in the system. It is the engine of everything this video is about. Because where official money fails, unofficial money appears. Every time, in every century, like water finding a crack. And we know it appears every time, because it used to be so much worse, and the history here is genuinely unhinged. For most of history, you did not earn money in prison. You paid money to be in prison. In England, into the 19th century, jailers were not government employees. They were businessmen who had purchased the jail the way you'd purchase a franchise. And the prisoners were not inmates. They were guests. Paying guests. There was an admission fee when you arrived. The prisoners called it garnish. There was rent for your bed, more if you wanted one without a stranger already in it. There was a fee to have your irons removed, a service politely named easement, which is the 18th century version of paying extra to remove the ads. The jail sold beer, at jail prices, in a jail tap room, to people who legally could not leave, a business model so airtight that every airport bar still uses it today. And the masterpiece. There was a release fee. Men acquitted in court, found innocent, were marched back to their cells and held until they paid their exit charge. Innocent, and detained over an unpaid bill by the concessions department. When the reformer John Howard surveyed England's jails in the 1770s, this was his most incandescent finding. Free men, cleared by juries, rotting inside because freedom had a checkout fee. And it stacked. Debtors, people whose entire crime was owing money, were locked up until they paid, in a place where they could earn nothing, while their bill for room and board grew daily. Imprisoned for debt, into a machine that manufactures debt. Payday lenders study that model the way film students study the classics. One of the men who lived this was a 12-year-old boy whose father was locked in the Marshalsea debtors' prison in London, and who was pulled out of school and sent to paste labels on jars of shoe polish to service the family debt. The boy's name was Charles Dickens, and he spent the rest of his life writing about prisons and debt with an anger nobody at the time fully understood because he never told them he'd lived it. So understand what the first prison economy actually was. It was not run by prisoners. It was run by the landlord. Prison didn't contain an economy. Prison was the business. Reform eventually killed the fee system. States took over the jails. Cash was banned inside, and that ban created the modern era, which runs on a simple, beautiful principle. If you outlaw money, whatever people trade instead becomes the money. For most of the 20th century, in American prisons, that meant cigarettes. Cigarettes are almost suspiciously good at being currency. Portable, divisible, durable, identical to each other, and desired by nearly everyone, which is the exact checklist economists use to define money, and which, you'll notice, gold barely passes and your average cryptocurrency fails entirely. Packs were dollars, cartons were hundreds. Prices in cigarettes stayed remarkably consistent across prisons that had no contact with each other. A haircut, roughly 2 packs, coast to coast, like the system had a central bank nobody could locate. And then, in 2004, the federal government did something governments occasionally do to a currency. It canceled it. A nationwide smoking ban in federal prisons, and overnight the cigarette was demonetized. An entire economy's money supply deleted by Memo. Economists would call this a monetary catastrophe. What happened next is the interesting part. Within months, a new currency emerged and stabilized across the federal system. Foil pouches of mackerel fillets from the commissary, about $1 each. The Mack. And the reason it won is the punchline. Almost nobody wants to eat it. That's not a flaw, that is the entire design. A currency people consume disappears from circulation, but a pouch of oily fish that everyone values at $1 and no one craves just keeps moving, hand to hand, uneaten, forever. It's the gold standard, except the gold is fish. Prisoners even developed a 2-tier system. Crisp, fresh-dated pouches passed as money, while old, dented, expired pouches got demoted to actually being eaten, which is a street-level rediscovery of a principle called Gresham's Law that usually requires a graduate seminar. 20 years on, the Mack still trades at roughly $1. It has now outlasted several national currencies and, at last count, about 12,000 cryptocurrencies. Because you cannot rug pull a fish. There is no white paper. There is no founder who moves to a non-extradition country. There is just protein, in foil, holding its value with more dignity than most things on a stock exchange. But the fish is a federal story. And in the state systems, something even stranger happened. Because the currency that took over there tells you what was going wrong inside. In 2016, a sociologist named Michael Gibson Light spent a year embedded in a state prison studying inmate labor and stumbled into a monetary transition. The old currencies, tobacco, stamps, were being displaced prison by instant ramen. The soup. A brick that costs about 59 cents was becoming the unit everything else was priced in. A sweatshirt, 2 soups. A week of laundry service, 1 soup. Gambling debts, tutoring, cell cleaning, all denominated in soups. And the reason was not fashion. Over the previous decades, prison food budgets had been quietly cut. Portions shrank, meals dropped. The researcher called it punitive frugality. And in an environment where the state's calories stopped being enough, the most liquid asset became the one you could eat. Sit with that. Money always tells you what a society is short of. Outside, in the 2020s, the dollar lost about a quarter of its purchasing power in a decade, and we all just kept tapping our little rectangles and wincing at the receipt like it was weather. Inside, the currency literally became food, because food was the thing running out. When a currency is backed by calories, inflation isn't a chart, it's hunger. The most honest currency in America is a brick of noodles, because it is the only one you can actually eat when it crashes. So that's the money. Now how do you get it? On 23 cents an hour. And the answer is the part of prison life that would look most familiar to anyone who's ever been broke, which is most of us. You hustle. Every cell block is a gig economy that predates the term by a century. The man who can really cut hair is the barber, and commissary day is payday. The man who can draw becomes a greeting card industry, portraits of kids from photographs, Mother's Day cards that say what the buyer never learned how to, priced in soups and worth every noodle. Jailhouse lawyers draft appeals for men who can't read the charges against them, paid in commissary, and now and then one of those handwritten filings actually cracks a case open, which should embarrass a number of people who went to law school. There are cooks who can turn commissary shelves into a meal, spreads, ramen, chips, summer sausage, engineered in a trash bag that men buy plates of like it's a restaurant, because for 10 minutes it is. There are laundrymen who press your state uniform under a mattress until it has a crease. Tattoo artists running homemade machines built from a CD player motor and a guitar string. Sports ticket writers running betting operations with the margins of a small casino. Outside, we invented an entire genre of podcast to explain the side hustle. Inside, it's just called Tuesday. And above all of them sits the true financial institution of every cell block, the storeman. The storeman buys commissary in bulk and lends it out at the universal rate, 2 for 1. Borrow a soup today, owe 2 on commissary day. That is 100% interest per week. Payday lenders get called predatory at 400% a year, and they are. The storeman's annualized rate is a number your calculator displays in scientific notation, and yet his repayment rate would be the envy of every bank in America, partly because everyone knows where everyone lives, but mostly because of something deeper we'll get to in a minute. Credit exists inside. It just isn't a score. It's your name. Now, everything so far, the currencies, the hustles, the lending, you could dismiss as improvisation, scattered people coping. So here's something that almost nobody talks about. The one time the whole process happened under the eyes of a trained economist, who wrote it all down. In World War II, a British economist named R.A. Radford was captured in North Africa and spent years in German prison camps. Every prisoner received the same Red Cross parcel, same tins of beef, same chocolate, same tea, same cigarettes, identical endowments, perfect equality. Trade began within days because the Sikh soldiers didn't want the beef, and the French wanted the coffee more than the tea, and non-smokers were sitting on cigarettes they had no use for. Within weeks, not months, weeks, the camp had prices, and the prices were quoted in cigarettes, which had become money through nobody's decision in particular. There was a public exchange board listing bids and offers, updated like a ticker. There were shops. There was a services sector, laundry, tailoring, portrait sketching, priced in smokes. There was one legendary operator, a chaplain, who walked circuits of the camp trading up, and could start his lap with a tin of cheese and 5 cigarettes, and come back with a complete Red Cross parcel. Which is to say, the camp had professional arbitrage, conducted by a priest. There was a futures market. Bread rations arrived on fixed days, so bread now traded at a premium over bread Thursday, and men sold their future loaf for cigarettes today, meaning a shed full of prisoners in Bavaria independently derived the time value of money, the concept your bank uses to justify giving you almost nothing. There was even monetary policy, involuntary but real. When Red Cross parcels flowed, cigarettes were plentiful and prices rose. When supply lines were bombed and parcels stopped, the money supply literally went up in smoke and prices collapsed. Inflation, deflation, driven by the central bank of the Luftwaffe's flight schedule. And when hand-rolled, thinner cigarettes started circulating while the good machine-made ones vanished into pockets, the camp rediscovered Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good, about 400 years after the Tudors first wrote it down. Radford survived, and in 1945 published a paper called The Economic Organization of a POW Camp. And it is still assigned in economics departments today because it is the closest thing the field has to time-lapse footage of money being born. Nobody taught them, nobody organized it. Equality lasted about a week. Markets aren't built, they condense. And the story hasn't stopped condensing, because prison money went digital right around the time yours did. The modern inside economy increasingly runs on numbers again, transfers between accounts on the outside, moved by phone, settled by people who never touch anything at all. Payments have become invisible in there for the same reason they became invisible out here. It's faster, it's cleaner, and it leaves the folding money out of it. Meanwhile, the official channels found their own angle. Families sending money to a commissary account often pay a transfer fee for the privilege, a service charge to wire your own son $20, which means the convenience fee, the defining financial innovation of our era, made it all the way into the visiting room. Money on both sides of the wall is now mostly a number in motion, skimmed lightly in transit. The difference is that prisoners have no illusions about theirs. They know the Mack is only worth $1 because everyone agrees it is. They know the whole system is a shared story, enforced by trust and memory. We have the same system out here. We just stopped noticing. The average person believes in their bank balance with a faith the Mack has to earn every single day. Here is what all of this adds up to, and it is genuinely worth sitting with for a moment. The fee-charging jailer, the cigarette, the fish, the soup, the storeman's 2-for-1, the priest running arbitrage laps in a prison camp. All of it rests on one foundation, and it is not the token, it is the ledger. Anthropologists who study the origins of money keep finding the same thing the cell block proves. Money did not begin as coins. It began as debt, as memory, as a record of who owes whom, scratched into clay tablets in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. The coin came later, as a portable receipt. Strip everything away from a group of human beings, the cash, the banks, the apps, and they do not revert to some primitive barter chaos. Within weeks, they rebuild the ledger, because the ledger was never in the vault. It was in the heads. Inside, your credit is your name, and the ledger is social, and everyone can read it. Default on the storeman once, and you have not lost points on some score in a database. You are unbanked in the only economy available, in a market you physically cannot leave. Which is why repayment rates in there humiliate the ones out here. We built credit scores because strangers can't remember each other. Prison never has that problem. In a place with no banks, your name is the bank, and everyone knows your balance. Let's zoom out one final time, because the ending of this story is standing in your kitchen. It's 2026, and you have almost fully arrived at the place the prisoners have been for a century. You never touch money. Your salary is a number that appears, your rent is a number that departs, your coffee is a tap, your splurges come in 4 easy payments, and once a day a screen rotates toward you with a tip menu and 3 strangers watching. And you feel a small, cold fear that has no name yet. Your money is a story, a fiction the whole society agreed to believe at the same time, and it works only as long as nobody stops believing it, which is exactly, precisely, to the letter, how the mackerel works. The difference is that the prisoners know it. They watched their money be born, some of them watched it die by Memo, and they rebuilt it by Tuesday. So look at the whole chain one more time. The jailer at the gate with his hand out, charging an innocent man an exit fee. The 12-year-old Dickens pasting labels on polished jars while his family lived locked inside their own debt. The exchange board in a Bavarian shed, prices ticking in cigarettes. The chaplain walking his trading lap with a tin of cheese. The foil pouch of fish passing from hand to hand for 20 years, uneaten, outliving 12,000 cryptocurrencies. The 59-cent brick of noodles, quietly becoming the reserve currency of the American prison system because the food ran short. And the storeman's ledger, balanced to the soup, kept flawlessly, in the one vault on earth no search can open, his head. Prison was designed to take everything, and it does take almost everything, but confiscate every coin, ban every bill, search every cell, and you have removed exactly none of the money, because the money was never the thing in your hand. It was the agreement between the hands. Humans do not carry economies. Humans are economies. Lock 200 of us in a building with nothing, and in a month there will be prices, credit, a currency, and a guy near the showers doing 2-for-1. The market is not something we invented, it is something we remember, and it turns out it makes parole every single time.